Good evening, everyone. As usual, the reminder, talk into the microphones. So apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Mark Poppy, one of our independent persons, and Councillor Williamson.
Thank you very much. Minutes for the last meeting, 27th of November. This isn't obviously the joint meeting. This is the last audit and governance meeting. So hopefully you've had a chance to read those minutes. Can I have a proposer or seconder or some comments? Nick.
Sorry, a minor point. The independents aren't down as attending the last meeting, so if you think I was here, well, I think I was here because it says I said something. So, yeah, I was here. I was here. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah. So, could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Wilcox, a seconder. No, Councillor Deering. Thank you very much. Could we have a show of hands? Those for, and those against, and those abstaining. Oh, so yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That's carried. Just an announcement. Obviously, thank you for the attendance at the last joint meeting. I think it was a very useful session. Hopefully we'll have another one next year. Declarations of interest? No. Thank you. So the first item, the financial management Q2. Now, I understand that we actually have an updated Q3. And if everyone's okay, we'll skip this agenda item and move straight on to the more up-to-date data. Thank you. Item 6, the financial management 24-25 Q3 forecast. Is that you, Carl? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The reports provided give an overview of the expected outturn at the year end based on current expectations. The revenue forecast at the end of Q2 is provided in Appendix A, but has been superseded by the forecast at the end of Q3, which is in Appendix B. The overall overspend is now expected to be £955,000, which is made up of an overspend on services of just over £2 million, plus savings in interest payments and investment income of £561,000, with the reduction in reserves contributions of £486,000 making up most of the balance. The detailed list of key variances in the cost of services is attached in Appendix C. The overspend on BEAM makes up almost 75% of this total. The change in accounting policy to allow the capitalisation of interest during the build phase of major construction projects has resulted in a reduction of interest payments in the expenditure account of £340,000. Updates to the capital spending programme are provided in Appendix D. The key change here is the reprofiling into 25-26 of the reduced budget for refuse and recycling vehicles and containers, now anticipated to take place in Q1 of 25-26. Section 2.7 of the report also outlines the work being done on the outstanding debt. Currently, debt over 180 days stands at 2.27 million. At least half of this total lies with a handful of key accounts. Sections 2.8 to 2.11 of the report discuss the mitigations being considered for the overspend this year. The committee is invited to consider these figures, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Carl. Questions, comments, anyone? Councillor Deering.
Thank you very much. I'm sure Carl knows what I'm going to raise, which is debt, because that's come up before. Obviously, you must report debt, and we've come onto it before. It's very high, isn't it? It's very significant, and it's quite old. Could you bring to life a bit more what we're actually doing to try and get this debt paid? Perhaps I can get my, it's not a supplementary, but it's a slightly different question. Obviously, one of the things that goes, the best way to avoid debt is to avoid it in the first place. And whether we are improving our procedures so that if it be the case we get paid up front or whatever it may be. But they're my two broad points. Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, obviously it's quite a high amount. What we've been doing is obviously looking at some of the detail of that debt, and we identified basically about 5 or 6 key accounts, which account for about half of it. And I think those are being pursued. They're not necessarily all going to have positive outcomes. There's obviously issues. I think I can't remember what report the word used, but yeah, basically delicate issues around some of them. So that's ongoing. Obviously beyond that, then obviously there's more, but we've got a team in place now that are being, I suppose, educated to kind of go through that and try and get to the nitty gritty of some of the other debt. It will take time. It's obviously there's a lot of data involved, and we obviously got to prioritise the big ones first, and then we'll work onto the smaller ones. So it's an ongoing project. In terms of avoidance, I think some of the transformation projects may help. I think obviously if we can automate payments more, I think that helps. I think there are issues going forward on there, aren't they, in terms of trying to improve the payment systems. And I'm just thinking of the waste collection things and the stuff going there. Yeah.
Yes, at the moment we're actually trying to implement a direct debit system to be able to detect all the garden waste payments. Once that's actually in place and working correctly, there is no reason why we can't actually then extend that out to other services and hopefully get paid upfront for a lot of them, or when the bills fall due. And obviously, if they're on direct debit, there's more chance of it being paid, or noticing that there's issues earlier and quicker. So that's one of the areas we are planning on looking at going forward.
Yeah. Does that answer your question? Is there any more?
Thank you. Well, you sort of. I mean, it's clearly a big number, and I suppose it brings to mind two other questions or observations. You made reference there in your comments to the team now being in place. Of course, you remind us that I think it's right to say that the team was not in place for some considerable time. Can you just remind us for what length of time was the team not in place, and when was the team properly constituted so that we can now say that we've got effective attendance to this debt issue? I think I'd like to know that, please.
I'll have a go at that, because I think it was at one of these meetings. I'm going to guess that probably kind of 4 or 5 months ago. I think it's obviously in Stephen Linnett's time that he said that he got the team there, and obviously that I think at that point that then there was obviously a training issue, and I think that's still ongoing. So I think the team's in place. That obviously they're still getting up to speed with some of the processes that they need to do, and I think Matthew's been helping with that since Matthew's been along here, and you might be able to give me an update there.
So since I've been here since late November, I've been working with Anita, who is the team leader within the AP and AR. And we've been looking at what debt we have, who's doing what, how we're actually going about collecting things, what processes we've got, where we need to improve elsewhere. And we've been doing a forensic examination effectively of the debt that we have and what will be collectible, whether the companies are still in existence. And that is a process that's been working in the background at the moment. And I'm getting a lot of information back to me that we're collating now to be able to move it forward. There will be write-offs. The exact amounts I don't have at the moment. If I did have them, I would have tabled them already. It's a process that's ongoing, but I'm seeing improvements with working with the team, and the small steps are actually starting to bear through. We are seeing old debt actually coming in. They might not materialize fully into these numbers,
because they were at the end of December. But even yesterday, I heard 3 old debts being collected because we'd actually been contacting people and trying to progress things. We're also working with CPA, which is the Credit Protection Association, to go after some more trickier old debts. So we are putting new ways of working in place to actually move things along to where they really need to be.
Thank you. Councillor Deering.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Matthew. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I'm perfectly happy to accept that efforts are now underway and you're doing what you can. But I think I'm right to express concern that there's been a delay during the period of this administration between the election and the point at which the administration is really getting to grips with debt. I am concerned about that. It does seem to me that there's been some slippage there. You'll be pleased to know my final point on this is, as you both understandably mentioned in passing, of the 2.8 million debt, which as I understand it is not in any, at the moment, none of that debt is classified as a bad debt. How much of that 2.8 do you think will become a bad debt?
Do you want to have a go at that?
Of the 2.8 million, we currently have a 900,000-ish provision within the accounts as of the end of 23-24 accounts. So I'd expect it to be more than that. I can't give you an exact number at the moment because that's what we're working through.
Any more questions? Sorry, Councillor Wilcox.
Yeah, I just had one about Beam actually. The domestic rates or domestic rates estimate of 200,000 against a budget of 30,000. Has it really risen by 7 times?
There was a rates review last year. Was it last year? Okay, so we're still estimating that. Okay, so I think that it's anticipated, isn't it? There's going to be a rates review. Right. So yeah, we haven't had the final settlement yet.
Okay, and then so that £200,000 is effectively coming off whatever we think we're going to generate from Beam for the next so many years as well.
Potentially, I think there are plans to appeal some of these rates.
Yeah, the 200,000, our best guess of where we're likely to be after we took some advice. The 30,000 was an underestimation when they set the budget. We don't know the exact figure, and until we get the exact assessment through, we don't know whether we'll be able to appeal it, but we've not actually got the assessment yet. We have had conversations with the evaluation office, and we have provided information to them about trading figures, where they're up to, and hopefully we will get a more accurate assessment soon.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nichols.
Yes, a couple of questions. I just wondered how much is the overestimating debt from wrongly raised invoices? Is it a substantial amount or a small amount?
And that's what I'm trying to actually establish at the moment. We're working through the process to review each invoice, what's outstanding, should it have been raised. It's an ongoing process, and I'm sorry, I don't have exact figures, and
No, yeah.
I've got some final bits of certain ones, but I haven't reviewed them, so I don't know whether they're actually fully shouldn't have been raised yet or genuinely a bad debt.
It would be quite positive if it was a big amount because it.
There is one in the region of just over 200,000 that I'm looking at, a collection of a number of invoices.
Okay, so it's quite substantial, isn't it? I'm just looking at some costs, and I wonder what's responsible for the increase in centrally managed costs from 97,000 to 669,000. It seems quite a big increase. Is it because we've taken costs in house, or?
Can you answer that one?
It's on page 10 of the.
I'm sorry, I don't have the details on that one,
Okay.
but I can find out, and I'm happy to provide the information as soon as I can.
Thank you. And also, I keep asking about the communication strategy policy increase of 249,000. I didn't get an answer last time. It's up again. It's still in the figures.
I think that was a slightly different thing, wasn't it? Because that was comparing one year with the next, whereas this is comparing actual with budget. So
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
slightly different thing.
yeah,
but,
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah,
sorry,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I guess that some of these costs are obviously, when they set the budget, they're estimates, and
Yeah.
this sort of gone higher. And I can't remember now whether the 25-26 budget was at a reduction or an increase, off the top of my head.
It's just quite a big increase.
Just going back to the centrally managed costs, though.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, within this table of the variances, the key variances are all listed within the other Appendix C. So to a degree, rather than looking at the headlines for per department, actually the variance figures will probably it'll be in there somewhere.
Oh, okay.
So
Lost in the detail of
yeah, the detail will be in there. So
Yeah,
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 we might not know what goes in which category, but
no,
but-
it just looked quite alarming.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Bob? Oh, sorry. We go Bob first and then Nick.
Thank you. Question on a different topic this time, Chairman. Thank you. Appendix C, Charrington's house, 300,000 adrift. I have, as you again, I've been in meetings and put questions to you, Carl. And some months ago, you said that Charrington's house had been disposed of. How have we ended up 333,000 adrift on Charrington's house?
So this was actually in quarter one report as well. And basically what's happened here is that we were advised that once the development agreement was signed, then we'd lose the liability for rates, etc. On Charrington's house, and it turns out that wasn't actually the case. We retained the liability. So that number has been there since quarter one when we realised this. And yeah, it's simply that we'd misestimated when we were going to lose the liability. So we'd taken it out of the budget when we shouldn't have done.
Councillor Deering.
One supplementary. So why didn't the agreement have that effect? You advised in this chamber that it would be an outright disposal. What went wrong?
I think what went wrong was that we were advised that the liability for the rates would pass over as soon as we signed the agreement. It turned out that advice was wrong. So the agreement was always that it would only be passed over to the developer once the planning application, I think, was agreed. I think is the point. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what we've actually found out since, that the original information of when it transferred wasn't accurate.
Well, we only found that out, well, sort of mid to late last year. I can't remember exactly when it was. So it's just that the whole budget was incorrect in the first place. Yeah, so I apologise that was wrong, but it's not that anything slipped since. It's that the original estimate was incorrect. What's happening is what was always going to happen.
Okay. Yeah, Dave.
Sorry, one more. Feels like I'm picking on Beam, but the IT infrastructure Wi-Fi, no Wi-Fi meant using an overnight security company. Has that been resolved now?
I believe the IT, from the information I had, they're waiting for the Wi-Fi to go live, and once that's live, then we don't need the overnight security. I'll follow that up and find out when that will happen.
Okay, thank you.
Any more before I ask a question? Nick, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Three things actually, just 3 points. One was around the savings proposal. So part of the pressure this year arises because savings have been less than anticipated. So, and in fact, they've been less than 50% of what we budgeted. So my question is around what does that mean for 25, 26? So for next year, so we had a good conversation here around next year's budget, which assumes savings this year that would flow through. Does that mean we've got a bigger challenge in 25, 26 because we're not delivering those savings. That's point one. Second point was around the implications of the 1 million overspend. We're 6 weeks from the year end, so I can't, unless something fundamental happens, we're not going to see an outturn that's going to be hugely different. A lot of the mitigating factors are longer term than being able to address in 6 weeks. So just keen to just briefly understand the significance and the implications of that. And then thirdly, it was useful seeing the Q2 forecast and the Q3 forecast side by side, because some of the department forecasts have changed quite significantly within 3 months. So for me, it begged the question, how good is our forecasting, given that 3 months before this forecast, the numbers were very different. Not across the board, but certain departments, the numbers were very different. So do we need to focus on improving our forecasting skills in certain parts of the organisation?
Okay, so the first question about savings proposals. Yes, we obviously haven't achieved all those this year. I think obviously some of those are in the Appendix C, and many of those are still likely to happen, but they're likely to happen next year. So it's kind of delay rather than cancellation of the savings. I think in terms of going forward, yes, I think we need to have more focus on the savings that we plan to make. And I think, as we said, the last audit governance meeting, the leadership team are planning to meet every 2 weeks. I think that was right. 2 weekly to basically make sure all these savings are on track, because there's obviously some that have been missed this year, and obviously some of them have been missed for potentially kind of just genuine reasons, not necessarily that we've been incompetent, but things happen that make them impossible to achieve. So that's the first question. Second one, the implication on the overspend. Essentially, I expect the overspend will come out of the reserves. Is that correct?
We have been looking at mitigations, and that's why we're looking at capitalisation of interest to help with certain things. The whole of the MRP policy I'm currently working through at the moment, and the calculations of how much we have to charge. We're working with Arlene Close, one of our advisors. Again, that's one of the mitigations, and we're starting to look for other savings that may materialise to actually help the position going forward.
Third question about the forecasting. Yeah, I take your point. Obviously, there are some big changes, and it shouldn't change that much. I can say that our forecasting could be better. But having said that, I'm sure it's quite challenging.
I have only been here very shortly, and I can see where there are areas for improvement and some additional training around and with the team of what we look at, how we do things, and that's what I've actually been trying to focus on at the moment, to make sure that these numbers for Q3 are more accurate, and hence you might see some of the variations because we've been sat down, we've gone through them in more detail, and there's been more challenge to what's being presented. And I've been involved with the leadership team who have also challenged the numbers, gone through them more than once, and I've seen a very good process starting to evolve, so that going forward I believe there will be more robustness against the numbers. But as the year does go on, you do actually get more accurate information, because there's more information that's gone through as actuals, and assumptions are refined more. So there are plans to improve and improve both the quality of the numbers and also how they're actually reviewed and by who and how often.
That's really encouraging to hear, because that they sort of changing the culture of an organisation to really focus and financially manage properly starts in that sort of area. So that's really encouraging. I think on the cost savings point, it's you're right. Things happen, and yes, didn't want to imply there'd been sort of mismanagement or lack of urgency involved. So, however, when those changes happen, they always tend to go in the wrong direction, and therefore going forward to think about having a bit of contingency within those cost saving plans so that we've got a bit of headroom, because inevitably things happen and they go the wrong direction. Just things to think about for the future.
Thank you, Nick. Any more? Sue, yeah. Oh, Chris, sorry.
It's only just a very quick question. It kind of follows up on what Nick was saying, but because obviously you anticipate these savings, but I'm beginning to wonder how realistic were they ever in the first place? Because it's one thing saying we will save X amount of money, it's another thing doing it. So if we're putting in actually unachievable savings to start with, they're never going to be realised, and the budget's always going to have these variances, because when it comes to it, of course, they can't be achieved. I mean, I'd like to save lots of money on my electricity bill, but I have to live in a 1-bedroom flat for that, and I don't live in a 3-bedroom house. So it's that kind of idea. There's only so much that can be achieved, and I query that actually. It's not that things become more apparent as they go on. They were never achievable to start with.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's a good point, and obviously the savings targets are agreed with the heads of service, in advance. So the heads of service putting them forward as they believe that those are the savings they can make, and Nick's right. These things tend to only ever go one way, don't they? We tend to not over make savings. It always tends to fall short. So yeah, it just requires more close management to try and ensure that we don't fall down on these savings, just on an ongoing basis, and try and identify the ones that are struggling at an early stage, and trying to take mitigating actions at the earliest possible opportunity.
Okay, thank you. And I suppose, sorry, Matthew.
Should I just add on to that? There actually are new steps in place with the leadership team to monitor these quicker and more robustly than they have been in the past. And I will politely say some of the ones from last year were a bit too ambitious.
No problem. Thank you. Bob.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may say, in another place where I do the job that Carl does here, we set saving targets each year, and we work really hard every day of the year to make sure that they're achieved. And the upshot is that we either do achieve them, or we exceed the savings target, or we get really close. My on the strength of Nick's question, for which thanks, my perception is that we're quite a long way adrift here, that we've come up with savings targets and we're not too close to them. So that does cause me some concern, and it does seem to me, if I may say, Matthew, that what you've just said absolutely needs to be done, which is the leadership team, if it's not been doing it, needs to sit on these savings and absolutely make sure they're delivered. It's very, very important. Thank you.
I think that's actually been identified by the current leadership team. As you'll know, two of the former members of the leadership team are no longer around, and they've been looking at what is delivered, what's being delivered, and how a lot more robustly than I believe was previously looked at. So I'm actually seeing those steps that you would expect to see from a team of members, or team of officers, in a place where they're trying to take ownership of the numbers and looking to actually ensure that they actually do deliver what they're saying is achievable and what they actually do need to deliver. So I'm actually seeing them taking ownership, which is, from my point of view, is quite good.
Thank you. Can I ask my question now? Thank you. So, and this may be very unfair, but the debt element, is there anything tangible that debt is stopping us doing that you can put your finger on and say we're not able to achieve this because of the debt?
My instinctive answer is to say no. I don't, because in terms of obviously in terms of what we do, we have the finance available to do what we need to do, and I don't think that the debt necessarily stops us doing anything. You got anything to add there?
It would be nice if we didn't actually have the debt and you actually had all the money, because I wouldn't need to actually borrow as much, which would mean we were not paying as much interest out. But we do have a 900,000 bad debt provision within the accounts last year. Again, if that wasn't provided for, that may have put your position a bit better last year and this year.
Okay, thank you. On that basis, the recommendations for the committee are that the reasons for the net revenue budget end of year projected overspend of 955,000 be considered, and B, the capital programme forecast outturn of 9.0803 million, carry forward of 7.835 million be considered. Could I please have a proposer and a seconder? Thank you, sir. And a seconder? Thank you, David. Could we have a show of hands? Those in favour? Those against? And those abstaining? That's clearing. Yep. That is carried. Thank you very much. Move on to agenda item 7, Treasury Management Mid-Year Review 24-25.
Thank you, Chair. This is the mid-year Treasury Management Review and Prudential Indicators for 24-25. The report is in Appendix A, and members may suggest amendments or additions. The report highlights key issues in the economic background, along with details of the Council borrowing. Total borrowing on the 30th of September 2024 was 46.5 million, whilst investments totalled about 19 million, leaving the Council with net borrowings of 27.5 million. Almost all the borrowing now is short-term. The report also shows the reduction in the property investments as the Lothbury Fund is gradually wound up. The second fund we have, Hermes, is also likely to see changes in the next few months, which may see the Council get the majority of its investment back. I'm happy to take more questions.
Thank you very much, Carl. Questions, comments, feedback? No? Oh, Nick, sorry.
I always find this report quite difficult to understand. So I just wondered, in the spirit of your introductory comments there around any comments to think about the format of the report, I just wondered whether an exec summary at the beginning highlighting the key points to note would be helpful, because it's actually quite hard, I find, in reading that document to work out what the key points are that I need to be worried about. I read it all the way through, and I'm not quite sure I've identified the key points. So that, just in the spirit of your request, I wonder whether that's something that those who prepare the report might just like to consider.
Thank you. Very good point, Nick. Carl?
Yeah, I'll just ask Matthew if what he feels about that. Is there something we can do? I mean, obviously, there's kind of I think there's a few highlights in the report, isn't there? But
We can definitely consider and try and actually include a few key points going forward.
I'll certainly find that helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions before we put it to the vote? No? Well, on that basis then, the recommendation for the committee is that members examine and comment on the mid-year Treasury Management Review and Prudential Indicators for 24-25. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Proposer, Sue, thank you very much. And a seconder? Thank you, Chris. Could we have a show of hands? Those in favour, those for? Thank you. That's unanimous. That's carried. So, point 8, Corporate Procurement Strategy 25 to 30. Is this you, Carl?
yeah. So previously, East Arts Councils followed the National Procurement Strategy for Local Government 2022. The new procurement strategy will be underpinned by the Procurement Act 2023, which comes into force in February 2025. The new Act reforms the existing procurement rules, focusing on cutting red tape, supporting innovation, improving transparency, meaning everyone has access to public procurement data, and it also simplifies the process of working with the public sector, supporting more SMEs to bid for contracts. The new strategy will align the direction of procurement at East Herts with the LEAF priorities, which are listening, open and transparent, environmentally focused, acting with the community, and fair and inclusive. The committee is invited to review the draft procurement strategy 2025 to 2030 and actions within it as set out in Appendix A, and advise the executive of any significant issues.
Thank you there, Carl. Comments, questions? Sue?
I'll just say I think it's a really good thing to align the procurement strategy with the corporate strategy because it should really underpin everything we do as a council. And I welcome the emphasis on transparency because there's so many residents out there who still talk about brown envelopes in relation to contracts and negotiations with the council. It's quite alarming. So something to address that is really timely, I think. And I just wondered the new process, because there's more checks and balances in it. Is it likely to be a longer process than the existing one in any aspects?
I would hope not.
I think it's just going to be a different process. It's not to try and make it longer. It's just to try and open up the market a lot more to allow more smaller companies to bid.
Yeah, and that's really welcome as well, isn't it?
Councillor Wilcox.
Yeah, this is just the comment based on what Councillor Nichols was saying there, that when you talk about the comments that people get, the waste centre in Stortford, all the comments now about the amount of money that's been spent on it, and people say it's just a few white lines. Can we not do a better job of explaining what we are spending the money on, or is that what you're aiming for with transparency?
So I suppose it's all about council communications, isn't it? And trying to communicate more with the public, and obviously we do obviously do communications. Whether they hit the right spot, I'm not sure. I think it depends what the issue is, doesn't it? I mean, sometimes I think we do things very well, and sometimes it seems that people get the wrong end of the stick, and then we always find ourselves in a catch-up exercise trying to kind of get people to realise what's really going on.
Yeah, I guess that's what we're both saying the same thing. I think we should need to be up front and say we've done this and this is what was done, because people just see a few white lines and a bit of some things moved around. They don't realise all the groundwork that's gone underneath it because it wasn't particularly well promoted as such.
Yeah, and I think yes, it's a good point. Maybe with this kind of thing we should be promoting more, perhaps via the social media and the media and things like that, because I suppose people, it's here on the council's website in minutes for a meeting, but possibly we're not getting it out there in other formats. Yeah, good point.
Thank you. Chris?
Sorry, it's just a kind of little odd question, really, because obviously we're looking at procurement centres and they have good values underpinning them, and they're all values that we would support. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned of is that we've got like two contradictory things going on. On the one hand, we're opening up the procurement process. We want smaller companies, maybe more localised companies to bid, but then we have to look at the way that those are procured, because at the same time we're going to have to cut office staff and cut procedures to save money. So really what I'm asking for is what the safety is, and that how is it all being scrutinised to make sure that if we're opening it up, it will be value for money. Does that make sense? Because it's this kind of, you've got two things going on. You've got to save money, but you also want to open up your procurement process. Like tried and trusted people that you know and that you've used for years.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a balance to be struck, isn't there? And and obviously that this council has its priorities in terms of procurement, and yes, it has to get value for money, and you have to find the right balance there. And I think that's hopefully the strategy kind of gives people that guidance. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, the strategy is about opening up the market. We're going to have to follow some of the rules and the regulations going out, but the transparency part of this is all about also not just to the general public or to the members. It's also to other bidders who have actually tried to actually go after the contracts so they can see more information. There's more information's out there. Whether that helps them then to lower their prices or look at what they do going forward, let's hope it actually benefits everyone. But that's the transparency bit. Sorry, could I just also, one of the things I think you mentioned, sorry, earlier was about the lines, the recycling. That's HCC, not ourselves.
Sorry, apologies.
Thank you. Sue?
Just thinking in terms of the overall value of a bid, with the new process, there are things to consider, including environmental, societal and ethical values, which might have a greater monetary cost, but their value to residents and society is greater. Have you got going to have a formula in place that has an overall value for a bid, which offsets the different elements?
I believe there's different weightings allocated to different categories of how you actually look at things going forward. Part of the new rules, from my understanding, is that it doesn't always have to be the lowest price that you take. So it gives more weighting to other topics in other areas, which might actually be more in line with what you're trying to achieve. I'm still learning the new rules myself.
Thank you there. Bob?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just for clarification, can I just make sure I understand? There is a new Procurement Act 2023, which comes into force, as the note says, in February 2025. Am I right that that is primarily the reason for this paper and a modified approach to procurement that must, of course, comply with the new Act? That's really...
Yes, that's exactly the reason for this paper. That's why it's here. That's one of the main reasons, and it's also good for yourselves to have your own policy.
Thank you. Any more? Nick?
Couple of things. The cost versus other criteria I was going to raise, which but linked to that, I think, is in order to do that properly, you need really good process and you need really good capability to be able to make those judgments, weigh and assess accordingly. But also the more broadly, especially trying to attract small enterprises into the bidding process, structuring contracts so that small companies can bid is also quite a challenge. Need good skilled procurement people to do that, to structure contracts and bid to allow those bids. So question around capability within the organisation to be able to implement this. And then the other point was around within the Procurement Act 2023. It also there's also quite a focus on technology, encouraging innovation, efficiency, tougher action on underperforming contractors. There's a number of other things that are in there that aren't specifically mentioned in this strategy. Not saying they should be mentioned in the strategy, but that one around innovation seems to be something that we're encouraged to build into our strategy, so that those bidding know they've got to bring innovation, new ideas to the table when bidding for our contracts.
I believe we do actually have a very good procurement team in place. We actually share them with a couple of other councils, so they've got the expertise within the team, and we call on them when we need them. We have admin facilities within the finance team who provide some of the legwork for paperwork and for chasing things, but we call on the services of the shared procurement team, and I'm actually believe they're appropriately resourced, and they do consider what they need at all times. And I've seen a professional approach, and of the contracts I've seen them undertake for us, and even in how they've actually managed to pull this and turn this around very quickly for us to actually have something in place.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more for any more before we second? So there's one recommendation to review the draft corporate procurement strategy 25 to 30 and actions within it as set out in Appendix A and advise executive any significant issues. Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Sue, thank you very much. And a seconder? Chris, thank you. A show of hands. Those in favour, those for? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That's carried. Point 9 now. Agenda item 9, the accounting policies. Is this you as well, Carl?
So this report details a proposed change to our accounting policy that allows the capitalisation of interest during construction. The table in section 2.4 of the report shows the amount of interest that can be capitalised from each of the major construction projects that we've undertaken in the recent years. The grand total is 1.358 million, of which 340,000 can be applied in the current year, with a further 1.017 million being capitalised in 23-24. And that includes the amounts for previous years. The amount for 23-24 could, if appropriate, then be moved into the interest equalisation reserve, which you may recall may be necessary for any shortfalls on the property funds. MRP charges will increase slightly in future years to take into account the increase in asset value. The committee is invited to review the inclusion of the new policy and note the effect on asset values and interest charges in the future.
Thank you, Carl. Any questions, comments, feedback? Sue.
I mean, this might be a really stupid question, but are there any drawbacks to capitalising on interest?
It's not a drawback, but it's actually how you pay it back over time with the MRP. So instead of it going into the accounts, most of it in 23, 24 and years before, the MRP charge will slightly go up over the life of the asset. That's the only offset for this. It's not when, where, or if, it's just how it's actually repaid.
Thank you. Any more questions, comments? Well, oh, that's good. On that basis, then, the recommendations for the Audit and Governance Committee that the committee review the inclusion of a new accounting policy that allows the capitalisation of interest during construction, and B, notes the effect that this change in accounting policy will have on the associated values of relevant assets and the interest charges charged in 23-24 to the CIES. Can I please have a proposer and a seconder for this? Well, a proposer, thank you very much, Dave. And a seconder? Sue, thank you. Can we now vote on that? Those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. That is carried. Next point. This is you, Nick, I think. The Shared Anti-Fraud Services Progress Report 24-25.
Thank you, Chair. Very confusing having two Nicks sat together, isn't it? I don't know who organised that one, Michelle. Yes, Chair. This is an update from my team on our progress delivering the anti-fraud plan for the authority for the current year. This is a report that we bring on a fairly frequent basis to the committee for you to review. And I'll just pick out some highlights. I'm going to assume that members have read through it in some detail. Mentioned in the on page 2 of the report that the council has in place an anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policies. Those policies are actually due for review. So we were going to review them this year, but we've pushed that into our plan for next year. So I'll cover that in the next item. So the policies are in place at the moment, date from 2021. So a little bit old, but we did work with Stephen each year just to make sure that they were still relevant, appropriate for the authority, so they are still good and fit for purpose. We probably do need to have a good go through those next year, so that's in the plan. So currently for this year, my service issue lots of alerts to our partners when we see new and emerging fraud types. And for the first 3 quarters of this year, we'd issued 35 what we call urgent fraud alerts. So these are things that we've seen happening now. They're either reported to us by other partners, by other agencies that we work with, or forums that we're part of. They don't all impact on the council, so some of them will, and Matthew might have seen some of those over the last couple of months. We've also issued 4 more detailed reports where we're looking at frauds that are really impacting on local authorities that we work with. So those have been focused on what we call multiple employment fraud, which is also called polygamous workers. So this is where we've got people working for agencies, for local authorities, where they're working for multiple local authorities at the same time. And this is something that we've seen across Hertfordshire. Fortunately, I don't think East Herts has been affected at all, but working with HR team is key to make sure that as we're onboarding people from agencies, we're taking the appropriate checks. Identity fraud continues to be a big issue for us in various services that we provide. Overpayment, so deliberate overpayment, which sounds a bit bizarre. You wouldn't think that somebody would overpay their council tax, but we've seen organised crime groups hijacking council tax accounts, so they create a false council tax account. They'll see that property's up for rent or up for sale. They'll contact the council, say that they've moved in, get the council tax liability, change their name, and then make a huge payment against that council tax liability. And then they'll ask for that payment to be refunded, because 2 weeks later they'll tell the council they've moved out. So they're asking the refund then to go to a separate account, and that's really to assist in money laundering. So they're trying to layer that money across the local authority. So that's a particular issue that we have seen in Hertfordshire. We have seen some authorities that we work with affected by that type of fraud. And then we've also had MS account takeover, so people actually having their Microsoft accounts taken over for email, and that email has then been monitored. Fraudsters will access that. They'll monitor that account quite closely, and then they'll use that when particular transactions are taking place. So people like Matthew, Chief Exec, they'll be targeted because they're people with the ability and the responsibility for making key decisions. So again, we work very closely with IT teams within each of our partners to make sure that as that's happening, we're sharing that knowledge across the authority as well. Training, we had, I think, planned 5 sessions for East Herts this year. We actually delivered 7 so far. That includes training, as I mentioned already, around ID fraud, some work with the Revs and Ben's team as well, and with housing services. We've also delivered at the end of last year some training, or we hosted some training that was delivered by the Competitions and Markets Authority on bid rigging. So it's quite interesting, picking up on the previous subject about procurement. So that was we had the procurement, legal and finance teams involved in that training. First 3 quarters of last year, we received 77 allegations of fraud. It's very important to remember these are referrals. We call them referrals. They're not actual allegations or actual acts of fraud. It's where somebody suspects a fraud and they report it for investigation. So this is really sort of bread and butter work for us. So we've been doing this for 10 years for the authority now. So it's in the areas where we expect to see it, within housing, housing application process, within council tax, within blue badge abuse in your council car parks. So that's all fairly normal stuff. We work very closely with all of those teams to make sure they're preventing fraud occurring. We have so far closed, or had to the end of December closed, 9 cases where there'd been a full investigation required, and those cases actually identified some quite high levels of loss for the authority, £317,000 in total. 2 of those cases related to loss around housing benefit, so there were very lengthy frauds occurring over a long period of time. We worked with the Department for Work and Pensions to investigate those matters, so we are now in the process for the authority to recover that money and considering whether prosecution should be brought against those individuals. I mentioned the National Fraud Initiative. National Fraud Initiative is an exercise that takes place every 2 years. Every local authority in the country subscribes. We all upload our data in October. The data is all mashed up. That's a technical term. To look for fraud. So it's an exercise that's run by the Cabinet Office. It's very effective at identifying lots of, Matthew will back me up on this, lots of noise and lots of false positives, because Nick Jennings works for Hertfordshire County Council. I might also work for another authority. That looks like a fraud, so it gets reported as a potential fraud. I don't work for another local authority, by the way, but that gets picked up as a potential fraud. So it's lots of false positives for officers to work through on that. But we've started that process to start looking at those 200 odd matches we've received for the authority for this year. The authorities also signed up for the Fraud Hub. Slightly disappointed we haven't managed to progress that as much as we did last year. It was very effective in 23-24 for the authority. It's been a bit slower process, and that's down to, I think, sort of limited resources within the authority, within certain teams, to deal with some of the matches that came out of the work we were doing this year. So we're looking for an improvement on that work next year. We did prioritise the most urgent cases, so where we thought there was a strong likelihood of fraud, we worked with those services to make sure they were dealt with. We also mentioned in the report that we managed the council tax review framework for the whole of the county. That's an exercise which is funded by the county council. It's made available for every district and borough council for free. It's a free service to each of those. That was being really effective in 24-25. The single person discount review identified an extra £349,000 worth of revenue for council tax. Now, council only retains 10% of that, but it's some additional revenue during the year. The big benefit for East Herts Council in particular was the review of the empty homes data that the authority held, and as part of a review that the authority has or will be receiving, I think in April, when new homes bonus is received. I think at the minute it's looking, you've exceeded the threshold, so you're going to receive about £196,000 from the new homes bonus. That's how much will be received. So again, proportionately, I think that the districts maintain the majority of that. So there's some additional revenue to come in from there. And then just picking up on our KPIs, so on page 4 of my report, we've identified 6 KPIs for the service for East Herts this year. And again, this progress report is not our work within the Shared Anti-Fraud Service. This is us working with officers across the authority as well. So a lot of the work and the output from this report is actually undertaken by council officers. But just picking up on the KPIs, we are on target to achieve all of our KPIs for this year. The one exception being on 3A, where we've got a KPI to respond to high risk or urgent matters within 24 hours. As I think I've explained to this committee and all of our other committees this year, our case management system is simply unable to report that data for us in an accurate way or reliable way. So we're not able to report on that, unfortunately. We've tweaked that slightly for our KPIs for next year to make sure we do identify those. But we are dealing with all referrals on average within 24 hours anyway. So although we can't report separately on the urgent matters, you've got my assurance that if Matthew was to contact us or Helen, that will be picked up very quickly and we would deal with that. I'm just happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Nick. Comments, questions, feedback? Yes, Carl.
So I'm just interested in obviously the high value of fraud detected this year, and I was just wondering what's the recovery rate on the money that's potentially lost from fraud by taking action.
The good news on housing, well, sort of good news on housing benefit is you get subsidy back from the DWP on that. So you'll recover 40% immediately. If you're then able to recover the balance, or if you're then able to recover the whole amount, then in effect you can make a surplus on that. But the difficulty is you're trying to recover money from people that don't have much money. So I again have to defer to officers on that. Collection rate for council tax is excellent, the authority. As I mentioned with the SPD work, you'd expect to be collecting most of that in year because your collection rate is so good.
Thank you, Carl. Any other questions? Well, I'll ask one. You need to tell me whether it's appropriate or not appropriate, of course. The use of AI in this field, is it widespread? Do we use it?
We do a little bit. I mean, some of the work that we mentioned in the report around the use of analytics to identify potential fraud or error in tenancy fraud, which may not affect the authority directly because you don't hold stock, but we do work with housing providers. So we're doing a lot of work with them to identify tenancy fraud. The benefit for you is if we can free up some of their stock, it means people come from your housing register within the borough. We use AI for the council tax framework review. So we work with third-party providers to deliver that work. And one of the things we look for is innovation. So we're always looking for them. That's a 4-year contract we've got in place for them, but we're always looking for them to come back and tell us, actually, we're going to do it different this year. This is how we're going to deliver it. This is what we've learned from what we've done working across Hertfordshire. Within my service, we're looking at 3 areas to develop AI. One is with your shared IT service. So we're working with a cyber team, with Matt's team. And we're actually looking to develop AI that sits at the front end of all of your services. So when the customer approaches the authority for a service, whether it's a bin collection or to register themselves for council tax, actually we'll use AI and automation at the start of that journey to actually verify who that person is. We'll then have a cascade approach. So if we're happy with the information provided, they come straight in to apply for the service. If there's some more questions, then it'll be diverted to somebody who can deal with that. If it looks like fraud, come straight to the fraud team. So yeah, we're starting to look at AI and automation and the link between those two.
Thank you very much. Yes. No more questions. The recommendation for the Audit and Governance Committee is that we note the progress by officers and the shared anti-fraud service to deliver the anti-fraud plan for the council. Members, this item is for noting and so does not require a vote. Thank you. I think it's you again, Nick. The shared anti-fraud service, anti-fraud plan 25-26.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report again that we bring to all of our audit committees at the beginning of the year with our plan for the next 12 months. It's again fairly routine process for us. It's a business as usual piece of work, but it's establishing with officers where we want to focus our resources for the year. So we mentioned at the beginning of the report some of the most recent reports that have come out around fraud. I'll draw members' attention to 1 or 2 of those. One is the impact of fraud and error on public funds, a report by the National Audit Office, which produced some quite dramatic figures based on the Public Sector Fraud Authority's estimate of fraud across the public sector. Good bedtime reading if you have trouble sleeping, but the figures in there are quite stark. So the risk of loss for the public sector is significant. There's also been some other authorities, other reports come out from other authorities. CIFAS's Fraudscape Report 2024 talks about AI generated fraud. So we need to be aware of how fraud is changing and the landscape of fraud is changing. We've got our opportunists and we've got people that are setting out to defraud us, in quite a dedicated, planned way. They're quite highly motivated to attack our services. So there's a few reports there for members to get their teeth into. So the plan itself, as mentioned in the covering report, is based on current best practice from National Audit Office, SIPFA, MHCLG. Did get that name right tonight, put it wrong the other night, and the Local Government Association as well. So we are using that established best practice in how we deliver the plan for the authority. Plan's been developed over several years because we've worked with these types for a long time, and we follow a model which comes out of the Fighting Fraud and Corruption Locally strategy, which was delivered by CIFAS and a number of other organisations. And that plan, as I mentioned earlier, it isn't just the role of the Shared Anti-Fraud Service; it's the role of all officers to engage with this plan and support our work across the authority. And obviously, members have got a key role as well in ensuring the work's delivered to plan. So the plan itself, there's only a couple of things I really want to draw out of the plan. Obviously, there's been an increase in fees, so everybody will jump on me about that. So the 4% increase in fees was agreed by the board, SAF's board, which Matthew's predecessor, Stephen Linnett, sat on. I think, Matthew, you attended the March meeting, aren't you? So the board set our fees for the year. They agree that for each authority. The fee is charged by Hertfordshire County Council. That comes into the service. We report back then to the board on what we're doing with the money, how we're spending that across all of our partners. And one of the key areas is the days, the service days that are bought back for the authority. And this year, because of some changes within the team, we've got several people completing apprenticeships. Those apprenticeships are coming to an end, which means they can release a bit more resource for our use this year. We'll be able to provide just under 300 days compared to 267 in the current year. So we've increased significantly the number of days work that we'll provide to the authority. So 4% sounds like a bargain. And then on next page of the report, we break down the various service areas where we're working. So cross-cutting corporate initiatives, working with housing services, revenues, and what have you that I mentioned earlier. A couple of the key areas in here is assisting with the review of the council's anti-fraud policies, which I mentioned earlier, but a real need to review those policies in line with the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act. A sexily named act came in 2023. It has a very worrying offence, a new offence created within the Act, which is a failure to prevent fraud. Local authorities are caught by that particular offence, so we've got to make sure that all of our policies that we have in place around corruption, fraud, all of those linked offences, that we've got strong policies in place, that we've got good training, our staff are aware, and we've got a good response in the event that the authority becomes liable for a failure to prevent fraud. It's a very strange offence. It's actually a failure to prevent a member of staff committing a fraud for the benefit of the authority. So that's quite strange. So you have to start thinking of scenarios where that might happen. So that's part of the risk assessment for the authorities, is identifying where those things might occur. As I say, local authorities have been caught by this legislation. It wasn't designed to catch local authorities, but as usual, because of the size of organisations and the spend that we have, we are caught by it. So there is a piece of work for us to be doing with Matthew's successor and the legal team as well, to make sure that we are well protected against potential for that to happen. And then I've mentioned before that we've tweaked the KPIs because we couldn't achieve the previous KPI 3A, so we've removed it. But what we have done is we've put it in our standards of service. So there, what we've done is we've said anything that comes to us from a senior officer, anything that's high risk, high profile, that will come into our management work, and we will manage that through our weekly triaging meetings, so we can ensure that they're dealt with. So because we can't report on it, we're going to put it into our normal course of work. So hopefully that provides sufficient assurance for members of the committee. And again, it's me done.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Bob?
No, I just have one question, Nick. It's about your increase in fees. 4% of not very much is not very much. So can we be assured that the starting number is not very much? I'm slightly pulling your leg. It's okay.
I presume you don't want a response then. Thank you.
Any more questions? No? Oh, you got away lightly there. So the committee recommends to review and approve the anti-fraud plan for 25-26. Can I please have a proposer and a seconder? Bob is a proposer and seconder. Oh, David, thank you very much. Could I now ask for a show of hands? Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That's carried. Yes. If you want to leave us, feel free. If you want to hold on, you're most welcome. Thank you. Okay. Audit. The item 12, audit and governance work programme. Is this you, Matthew? Then?
Right, item 12. I've actually gone through and looked at everything that's coming to the future committees, the committee dates, and taken all the known events into account and updated the plan. I'm assuming that EY will be coming to the next meeting with 2 reports regarding the 21, 22, 22, 23, and I'm also assuming that once you've had those, assets will turn up, Paul from assets, to actually outline the 23-24 plan and to go through it with you, and also how he's going to actually present his report, as well as the outline plan for 24-25 at some stage, either on the same meeting or the following meeting. I've also made the assumption that we will deliver the accounts on time by the end of June. They will be produced, and that we will revert back to the normal cycle of reporting going forward, which should make it easier to review and monitor going forward. The appendix has details of each of the programme. I'll happily go through them if you wish me to.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Bob.
Thank you very much. This may not be an appropriate question, I don't know, so do say if it's not for this moment anyway. EY coming to a meeting, what on earth do we think they're going to say?
I'd like to hope they're going to actually talk you through the two reports that they need to present.
The question was genuine. One of the reasons for asking it is because the last time I was in this chamber with EY in the room, they were basically totally unhelpful. Clearly, you know, I'm not looking to shoot the messenger at all, but do we anticipate they will be any more helpful than they were last time?
I'm sorry, I've not actually seen that meeting. I wasn't actually part of it. I do know they are planning on issuing some sort of statutory notice, and they will want to present that and explain why they're doing it, and they will then allow you to question them.
Thank you. Any more, Sue?
Yeah, we have had discussion in the past about having fewer agenda items on our meetings and more regular meetings. I noticed there's a big gap between the May and September meetings again in this forward work plan, and we were supposed to align ourselves more with the senior leadership team and the agenda for decision making, and it seems to have slipped back to the wider gap between meetings, and I wonder if there's any movement on that. I mean, Jeffrey's not here today, he would have brought that up as well.
I'm pretty sure you can actually suggest the meeting dates, and depending if there is availability, we can look at what would work for yourselves more. I have just been going on the dates that I've been made aware of and the ones that were in place. If you want to look at changing them, I'm sure we can look at changing them. In relation to the number of items on the agenda, I think once you've actually played catch up and the accounts are out the way for the 3 years and we're back in the normal cycle, it may become more manageable.
Thank you. Any more? Nick?
Just to say, thanks for the work you've done on the plan. It made a lot of sense. If we can sit here in towards the end of the year and have caught up, that would be amazing. But that depends a lot on our auditor friends playing ball, I guess, to some extent. But no, thank you very much for these. I think they're very clear, and as you say, hopefully they'll become slightly better in 26 when we have caught up.
Thank you. No more? No more? Recommendation for the Audit and Governance Committee to approve the work programme as set out in the report and specify any training requirements. Could I please have a proposer and a seconder? Bob proposing and Sue seconding. Thank you very much. Could we please vote on that? Those in favour? Unanimous. That is carried. We're up to the last item now. Michelle, any urgent items? Oh, excellent. So no urgent items means that we can close the meeting at 2014. Thank you and good night.